The moment Sarah Owens felt her legs give out beneath her, she knew she had made a terrible mistake leaving the trading post alone. She crumpled into the deep snow like a rag doll, her body simply refusing to obey her commands any longer. The blizzard that had seemed manageable 3 hours ago had transformed into a white wall of death, and now she lay face down in a drift that threatened to become her grave. Her fingers had gone numb an hour past, her toes shortly after, and the shivering that had racked her body had stopped entirely, which she dimly understood meant something very bad. She had been traveling from Yankton, South Dakota, to meet her father at a mining camp 15 miles north, carrying important documents about a claim dispute that could not wait for spring. It was January of 1878, and the winter had proven itself one of the cruelest in recent memory. Sarah was 22 years old, educated back east, and perhaps too confident in her own abilities. Her father had always told her she had more courage than sense, and as the snow began to cover her motionless form, she thought he might have been right. She did not hear the horse approaching through the howling wind. She did not see the tall figure dismount and wade through the hip-deep snow toward her. She only felt strong arms sliding beneath her body, lifting her as though she weighed nothing at all, and a deep voice cutting through the storm. "I have got you. Stay with me now." Preston Porter had been riding fence lines for the McElroy Ranch when the blizzard struck with its full fury. Most men would have sought immediate shelter, but Preston had spotted tracks in the snow before the worst of it hit, fresh tracks that suggested someone on foot, heading north into nothing but wilderness. It was suicide in weather like this, and he had turned his sturdy Mustang, Sagebrush, to follow the rapidly disappearing trail. He was 26 years old, had been working ranches since he was 14, and knew this country like the lines on his own calloused palms. When he found the woman collapsed in the snow, her lips already taking on a blue tinge, his heart kicked hard against his ribs. He knew he was at least 5 miles from the line shack on the northern border of the ranch property, 5 miles through a blizzard that wanted them both dead. Preston wrapped Sarah in his heavy wool coat, then in the oilskin slicker he kept tied behind his saddle. Sagebrush was a good horse but could not carry them both through drifts this deep. Preston would have to walk, carrying the woman, leading his horse. 5 miles. He had done harder things, he told himself, though at the moment he could not recall what they might have been. He shifted Sarah in his arms, cradling her against his chest, and began to walk. The wind slammed into him like a physical opponent, trying to drive him backward, trying to steal the warmth from his body. His sheepskin jacket was not enough without the coat he had wrapped around the woman, but there was no other choice. He put his head down and walked. "You are going to make it," he said to her, though he doubted she could hear him. Her eyes were closed, her face alarmingly pale against the dark wool surrounding her. "My name is Preston Porter, and I give you my word I am getting you somewhere warm." The first mile was merely difficult. Preston was strong from years of ranch work, but carrying a full-grown woman through snow that came up to his thighs required every ounce of strength he possessed. His arms began to ache within 20 minutes. He ignored the pain. Behind him, Sagebrush followed faithfully, the horse's breath coming in great plumes of steam. The second mile was when Preston began to worry about his own survival. He could no longer feel his ears, and his fingers were going numb despite his leather gloves. The woman in his arms had not moved or made a sound, and he found himself talking to her constantly, needing to hear a human voice even if it was only his own. "I grew up in Missouri," he said, his words snatched away by the wind. "Came out here 5 years back looking for something different. Never did figure out what that something was, but I found work that suits me. Ranching is good work if you do not mind the solitude. Though I admit, I would prefer a little less solitude right about now and a little more of a warm fire." He stumbled over a hidden rock beneath the snow and nearly went down. If he fell, he was not certain he would be able to get back up. He caught himself, held the woman tighter, and kept walking. Sagebrush nudged his shoulder as if to encourage him. The 3rd mile was when Sarah began to stir. She made a small sound, something between a whimper and a moan, and Preston felt relief flood through him. "That is it," he said urgently. "Wake up now. I need you to stay awake if you can." Her eyelids fluttered but did not open. Preston kept walking. His legs were trembling now, his muscles screaming in protest. He thought of his mother back in Missouri, who had died when he was 16. She had been a small woman, delicate like this one in his arms, but with a spine of pure iron. She would have told him to stop complaining and keep moving, so that was what he did. By the 4th mile, Preston was staggering. He had to stop every few minutes to rest, though he never set Sarah down. If he put her in the snow, he might not have the strength to lift her again. Instead, he leaned against Sagebrush, letting the horse's solid bulk support them both for precious seconds before forcing himself onward. "Talk to me," he said to Sarah, though her eyes were still closed. "Tell me your name. Tell me what you were thinking heading out into this storm." To his shock, she answered. Her voice was barely a whisper slurred with cold. "Sarah. My name is Sarah Owens." "Sarah," he repeated, and something about saying her name made her feel less like a burden and more like a person, someone specific who needed him. "Why were you out here, Sarah?" "Had to reach my father," she mumbled against his chest. "The claim. They are trying to steal his claim." "Well, your father is going to have to wait," Preston said firmly. "Right now we need to get you warm before you lose any fingers or toes to frostbite." "I am so cold," she whispered, and he could hear tears in her voice. "I know. I am cold too, if it makes you feel any better, but there is a line shack just over the next rise. I have stayed there before. It is not much, but it has 4 walls and a stove, and that is all we need." He was not entirely certain they would make it to the next rise. His vision was starting to blur at the edges, and he could not feel his feet anymore. Each step required a conscious decision, a deliberate act of will. He focused on Sarah's face, pale against the dark fabric wrapped around her. She had brown hair, he could see now, and fine features. Even half frozen and unconscious, she was lovely. That was a strange thing to notice when they were both possibly dying, but Preston found it gave him something to focus on besides the pain and the cold and the exhaustion. He wondered what color her eyes were. He wondered what she sounded like when she laughed. He wondered if he would live long enough to find out. The 5th mile nearly killed them both. Preston fell twice, going down hard on his knees but managing somehow to twist, so he landed on his back with Sarah on top of him, protecting her from the impact. The second time he fell, he lay there for a long moment, staring up at the white sky, wondering if it would be so terrible to simply stay there and let the snow cover them both. Then Sarah opened her eyes, and he saw they were gray, the color of wood smoke. She looked directly at him with an expression of such trust that it broke something open in his chest. "Please," she whispered. "Please do not stop." He got up. He did not know where he found the strength, but he got to his feet with Sarah in his arms, and he kept walking. 10 more minutes of stumbling through the blinding snow, and then he saw it, the dark outline of the line shack, barely visible through the storm. "There," he gasped. "See that? We made it, Sarah, we made it." Getting the door open while holding her was impossible, so he finally had to set her down, propping her against the rough wooden wall while he wrenched the door open. It was not locked. Line shacks never were. They existed for exactly this purpose, to provide emergency shelter. He lifted Sarah again and carried her inside, kicked the door shut behind them, and lowered her carefully onto the single bunk built against one wall. The interior of the shack was barely warmer than outside, but at least they were out of the wind. Preston's hands shook so badly he could barely light a match, but he managed eventually to get a fire started in the small pot-bellied stove. There was a supply of firewood stacked in the corner, enough to last them several days if necessary. Within minutes, blessed warmth began to spread through the small space. Preston turned his attention to Sarah. She was conscious but shivering violently now, which he knew was actually a good sign. It meant her body was still trying to warm itself. He peeled away the wet outer layers of her clothing with fingers that felt like blocks of wood. Underneath, her dress was damp but not soaked through. He wrapped her in both of the scratchy wool blankets he found in a trunk under the bunk, then added his bedroll for good measure. "We need to warm up slowly," he told her, his own teeth chattering. "Too fast can be dangerous." She nodded, watching him with those remarkable gray eyes. "You saved my life," she said. "I am just glad I found you when I did." He sat down heavily on the floor near the stove, suddenly unable to stand any longer. "Another hour and you would have been past saving." "How far did you carry me?" "5 miles, give or take." She stared at him. 5 miles, in that storm. "There was not really an alternative," he said simply. "The ranch headquarters is 12 miles south. This was the closest shelter." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I do not know how to thank you. I do not even know your name." "Preston Porter." He managed a tired smile. "And you do not need to thank me. Out here you help people when they need it. That is just how things are done." "Not everyone would have come looking for tracks in a blizzard," she said quietly. "Not everyone would have risked their own life." He had no answer to that, so he focused on getting himself warm and dry. His boots were caked with snow and ice. When he finally got them off, his feet were white and bloodless. He rubbed them vigorously, trying to restore circulation, grimacing at the painful prickling sensation that meant feeling was returning. They sat in silence for a while, both too exhausted for conversation, simply absorbing the warmth from the stove. Outside, the blizzard continued to rage, but inside the small shack they were safe. Gradually, color returned to Sarah's face and Preston stopped shivering. "Tell me about this claim dispute," Preston said eventually. "What is so important it sent you out into a blizzard?" Sarah pulled the blankets tighter around herself. "My father found gold last summer on what he thought was unclaimed land about 30 miles north of Yankton. He filed the proper papers, did everything by the book. But now a man named Randall Kemp is claiming the land was always his, that he has a prior deed. He showed up 2 weeks ago with hired guns and told my father to get off the property by the end of January or face the consequences. And the documents you were carrying, proof that my father's claim is legitimate. The original survey maps from the territorial office. I was taking them to my father so he could present them to the magistrate in Deadwood. There is a hearing scheduled for next week." Preston frowned. "I know of Randall Kemp. He owns a fair amount of property around the Black Hills, not a man with much regard for the law when it gets in his way. That is why the documents are so important. Without them, Kemp might successfully intimidate the magistrate into ruling in his favor." She looked stricken suddenly. "Oh God, the documents! They were in my satchel. The leather bag you were wearing across your body. Yes, still there, I saw it." Preston gestured to where he had hung her wet things near the stove to dry. The satchel dangled from a peg, water dripping from its edges. "They will be wet but hopefully readable once they dry out." Sarah sagged with relief. "Thank God, and thank you, Preston, for everything." The way she said his name did something to his pulse. He told himself it was just the adrenaline wearing off, the aftermath of their ordeal, but he knew it was more than that. He had never believed in love at first sight, had always thought it was something invented by dime novelists to sell stories. But sitting there in the warm glow of the stove, looking at this woman he had carried 5 miles through hell, he felt something shift fundamentally inside him. Night fell, though they could only tell by Preston's pocket watch, since the storm made it nearly as dark as midnight at noon. They ate hardtack and jerky from the supplies kept in the shack, washed down with water melted from snow. It was not much of a meal, but it was food, and they were both grateful for it. "Tell me about yourself," Sarah said as they ate. "Where you come from, what brought you out here?" So Preston told her. He spoke of Missouri, of the small farm where he had grown up, of his father who drank too much and his mother who had worked herself to death, trying to hold everything together. He told her about leaving home at 17 with nothing but a horse and $10 in his pocket, about the various jobs he had worked his way west. Cattle drives, mining camps, railroad crews. He had done it all before finding his place on the McElroy ranch. "And what keeps you there?" Sarah asked. "At the ranch, I mean. You could work anywhere." Preston considered the question. "I suppose I like the independence of it. Ranch hands are more or less left to their own devices, trusted to get the work done without constant supervision, and the country up here suits me. It is hard country, does not forgive mistakes, but it is honest. You know where you stand. Like today," she said softly, "honest and unforgiving." "Like today," he agreed. "Though I will say, I am glad for the hard country and the hard weather if it means I was in the right place at the right time to find you." She smiled at that, and Preston discovered what her smile looked like. It was worth the 5-mile walk, he decided. It was worth everything. "What about you?" he asked. "How does an educated Eastern woman end up in Dakota Territory in the middle of winter?" Sarah's smile faded slightly. "My mother died when I was 19. Cancer. After that, there was not much keeping me in Philadelphia. My father had already moved west, chasing stories of gold in the Black Hills. He wrote to me constantly, telling me about the opportunities out here, the freedom, the chance to build something new. So last spring I sold our house in Philadelphia and used the money to come west and stake my father to his prospecting." "Do you regret it?" "Not for a moment," she said firmly. "I love it here. Yes, it is hard, and yes, it can be dangerous, as I learned today. But I feel alive out here in a way I never did back east. There, everything was decided for me before I was even born. Who I would marry, how I would live, what was considered acceptable behavior for a woman of my class. Here, I can be whoever I want to be." Preston understood that sentiment entirely. "Freedom," he said. "That is what you found out here." "Yes, exactly that." They talked late into the night, sharing stories and dreams while the blizzard howled outside. Preston learned that Sarah could shoot, that she had read more books than he had known existed, that she had a quick wit and a laugh that made him want to keep making her laugh just to hear it again. She learned that he had taught himself to read at age 12, that he could track anything that left a mark, that beneath his quiet exterior was a man who thought deeply about things and had a code of honor he would not compromise. When exhaustion finally overtook them, Preston insisted Sarah take the bunk while he made a bed on the floor near the stove. She protested, but he would not hear otherwise. "You nearly froze to death today," he said firmly. "You are taking the bunk, and that is final." "You nearly froze to death too," she pointed out, "carrying me." "I am used to rough sleeping. Please, Sarah, let me do this." She relented, but as he lay on the hard floor wrapped in his coat, he heard her voice from the darkness. "Preston." "Yes, thank you. Not just for saving my life, but for being such good company. I was terrified when I realized I was lost in the blizzard. But now, here with you, I feel safe." His throat tightened. "You are safe. I promise you that. Sleep now." He lay awake long after her breathing evened out into sleep, thinking about the strange turns life could take. This morning he had been alone, had expected to stay alone, had accepted loneliness as the natural state of his existence. Now, there was a woman sleeping 6 feet away from him who had somehow become the most important thing in his world in the span of a few hours. He knew it was foolish. She was educated, refined, from a different world than his. Once the storm broke and he got her safely to her father, she would go back to her life and he would return to his. And this would just be a story they each told sometimes about the blizzard of 1878. But even knowing that, he could not stop the way his heart had opened up and let her in. The storm blew itself out by morning. They woke to brilliant sunshine reflecting off a landscape transformed into a white wonderland. The snow had drifted in places to 10 feet or more, sculpted by the wind into fantastic shapes. It was beautiful and deadly in equal measure. "We should be able to make it to the ranch headquarters today," Preston said, looking out at the pristine snow. "The going will be slow, but the weather is clear." Sarah was checking the documents from her satchel, laying them out carefully near the stove to finish drying. The ink had run in places, but the maps were still legible. "These should be all right," she said with relief. "I can still get them to my father." "About that," Preston said carefully. "Your father's camp is another 10 miles north of here, and that is 10 miles through deep snow. The ranch headquarters is only 7 miles south, and the trail will be easier. What if we go to the ranch first, get you properly recovered, and then I can ride with you to your father's camp in a day or two?" He could see the conflict on her face. "The hearing is next week. My father needs these documents, and he will get them. But pushing yourself too hard, too fast is just going to land you in trouble again. Sarah, you survived something yesterday that most people would not have. Give yourself a day or two to recover. That is all I am asking." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, we will go to the ranch first, but I am holding you to that promise to ride with me to my father's camp. You have my word." They set out an hour later. Sagebrush was rested and eager to move, though the going was treacherous through the deep snow. Preston walked ahead, breaking trail while Sarah rode. He would not hear of any other arrangement despite her protests that he had already done enough. "I am younger and stronger," he said simply. "And Sagebrush can only carry one of us through this snow. It makes sense for that to be you." The journey to the ranch headquarters took most of the day. They stopped frequently to rest, sharing food and conversation. With each mile, Preston felt the connection between them growing stronger. He caught Sarah watching him sometimes with an expression he could not quite read, something warm and wondering. When they finally arrived at the ranch headquarters in the late afternoon, Mrs. McElroy, the owner's wife, took immediate charge of Sarah with the brisk efficiency of a woman used to managing a household of rowdy ranch hands. "Good Lord, Preston, what have you brought us?" she said, but her eyes were kind. "Come inside, dear. Let us get you fed and into dry clothes and a proper bed." Mr. McElroy, a gruff man in his 50s who had built his ranch from nothing, clapped Preston on the shoulder. "Heard you did not come back yesterday when the storm hit. We were worried." "Found someone who needed help," Preston said simply. "Seemed more important than making it back. You look half dead yourself, son. Get some food in you and rest. The work will still be here tomorrow." Preston did as he was told, but his thoughts stayed with Sarah even as he fell into his bunk in the bunkhouse. He wondered if she was comfortable in the main house, if Mrs. McElroy was taking good care of her, if she was thinking about him the way he was thinking about her. He saw her the next morning at breakfast. Mrs. McElroy had found her a dress to wear, a simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. She looked well rested and healthy, and Preston felt relief wash through him. How are you feeling?" he asked as they sat together at the long table in the ranch kitchen. "Much better. Mrs. McElroy is an angel. She drew me a hot bath last night and fed me soup and made me sleep in a proper bed with actual sheets." Sarah smiled at him. "How are you?" "You were the one doing all the hard work yesterday." "I am fine. Sore, but fine." "Preston carried you 5 miles through that blizzard," Mrs. McElroy said, setting a plate of eggs and bacon in front of Sarah. "Merciful heavens, child, you must have a guardian angel looking out for you." Sarah met Preston's eyes across the table. "I do. His name is Preston Porter." The look that passed between them was enough to make Mrs. McElroy smile knowingly as she returned to the stove. Over the next 2 days, Preston showed Sarah around the ranch. She was interested in everything, asking intelligent questions about the cattle operation, the horses, the way the ranch functioned. He took her riding on one of the gentler horses in the remuda, showing her the country that he had come to love. "It is magnificent," she said as they sat their horses on a ridge overlooking a snow-covered valley. "I understand why you stay here." "It suits me," he agreed, "though I will admit it is better with company." She turned to look at him, and he saw his own feelings reflected in her eyes. Something had shifted between them, something that had started with him carrying her through the blizzard and had grown stronger with each hour they spent together. "Preston," she said softly, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I have been thinking about what happens next. About going to my father's camp, about the hearing in Deadwood, about all of it." She paused, seeming to gather her courage. "And I keep coming back to you, to what I feel when I am with you." His heart was pounding. "Sarah, let me finish," she said quickly. "I know this is fast. I know we have only known each other a few days. But Preston, when you picked me up out of that snow, when you carried me all those miles, something inside me recognized something inside you. Like my soul knew yours somehow. Does that sound crazy?" "No," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "No, it does not sound crazy at all, because I feel it too." "You do. From the first moment I saw you lying in that snow, something in me said her. Like everything I have done, every choice I have made, every mile I have traveled was to put me in that exact spot at that exact moment so I could find you." He took a breath. "Sarah Owens, I know I am just a ranch hand with nothing to offer you but a pair of strong arms and an honest heart. I know you deserve someone educated like you, someone who can give you the kind of life you were born to, but I have to tell you how I feel. I am falling in love with you. I think I started falling the moment I lifted you out of that snow." Tears were streaming down her face, but she was smiling. "I do not want the life I was born to. I want this life. The one where I get to be strong and free in myself. And Preston, I want that life with you. I am falling in love with you too." He reached across the space between their horses and took her hand. "I do not have much. Just my pay and my horse and my saddle. But I swear to you, if you give me a chance, I will spend every day of my life making you happy. That is all I want," she said. "That and you." They might have kissed then, but his horse chose that moment to sidestep, breaking the connection between their hands and making them both laugh. "I suppose we should head back," Preston said. "But Sarah, I need to know. What about your father? What about the claim dispute?" "We will ride to his camp tomorrow like we planned. You will meet my father, we will give him the documents, and then I will tell him about you." She smiled. "He is going to like you, Preston. He values honesty and courage and hard work. You are everything he respects in a man." "I hope you are right, because I intend to ask him for permission to court you properly." "Court me?" She raised an eyebrow. "Preston Porter, I think we are a bit past courting, do not you?" "Maybe so, but I want to do this right. Your father deserves to know that my intentions are honorable." Her expression softened. They are the most honorable intentions anyone has ever had toward me. My father will see that." They rode to Sarah's father's camp the next day, Preston and Sarah together on sagebrush since the snow was still too deep for 2 horses. Samuel Owens was a man in his 50s, weathered by sun and hard work, with the same gray eyes as his daughter. He emerged from his tent when he heard them approaching, and his face transformed with relief when he saw Sarah. "Thank God," he said, pulling her into a fierce embrace. "When the blizzard hit and you had not arrived, I feared the worst." "I nearly met the worst," Sarah admitted. "Father, this is Preston Porter. He saved my life." Samuel turned to Preston and extended his hand. "Then I owe you a debt I can never repay." "No debt," Preston said, shaking his hand firmly. "I did what anyone would have done." "Not anyone," Samuel said shrewdly. "My daughter tells me you carried her 5 miles through a blizzard. That is not something just anyone could or would do." Sarah presented her father with the documents, and Samuel examined them with satisfaction. "These are perfect. With these, Kemp does not have a leg to stand on. The hearing next week should be straightforward." He looked at his daughter. "You took a terrible risk bringing these to me." "They were too important to wait," Sarah said. "And besides, if I had not taken that risk, I would never have met Preston." Samuel looked between them, and Preston saw understanding dawn in the older man's eyes. "I see. And how exactly did you meet my daughter, Mr. Porter?" So Preston told the story, leaving out nothing. He described finding Sarah collapsed in the snow, carrying her to the line shack, the 2 days they had spent at the McElroy ranch. When he finished, Samuel was quiet for a long moment. "My daughter is precious to me," he said finally. "She is all I have left in this world. I need to know that any man in her life will treat her with the respect and care she deserves." "I give you my word on that, sir," Preston said steadily. "I love your daughter." "I know it is fast. I know we have not known each other long, but I have never been more certain of anything. If you give me your blessing, I would like to court Sarah properly, with the intention of marrying her if she will have me." Samuel looked at Sarah. "And what do you say, daughter? Is this what you want?" "Yes," Sarah said without hesitation. "He is what I want, father. Preston is everything I have ever hoped to find. He is kind and brave and strong, not just physically but in character. I love him." A smile broke across Samuel's weathered face. "Then you have my blessing." "More than that, you have my gratitude, Preston. Not just for saving my daughter's life, but for making her happy. That is worth more than all the gold in the Black Hills." They stayed at the camp for 2 days, helping Samuel prepare for the hearing. Preston and Samuel worked together to reinforce the camp's defenses in case Randall Kemp tried anything before the legal proceedings. And Preston found he liked Sarah's father immensely. The man was honest and hardworking, had a sharp mind despite his lack of formal education, and clearly adored his daughter. On the second evening, as they sat around the campfire, Samuel told Preston stories of Sarah as a child, her curiosity and courage and stubborn independence. "She gets that from her mother," Samuel said with a fond smile. "Catherine was the strongest person I ever knew. She would have liked you, Preston. She always said the measure of a man was not in what he owned, but in what he was willing to sacrifice for others." "Then I hope I would have met her standards," Preston said quietly. "You carried my daughter 5 miles through a blizzard," Samuel said. "I think you exceeded them." The hearing in Deadwood went exactly as they had hoped. With the documents Sarah had risked her life to deliver, the magistrate ruled decisively in Samuel's favor. Randall Kemp stormed out of the courthouse with threats on his lips, but Preston noticed the hired guns he had brought with him were no longer at his side. Men who lived by their guns knew when a fight was not worth the price, and facing down a determined prospector, his fearless daughter, and a cowboy with a reputation for never backing down was not a fight they wanted. After the hearing, Samuel sold half his claim to a mining company for enough money to set himself up comfortably. "I am getting too old to work a claim by myself," he admitted. "This way I can live off the investment and still have a stake in whatever gold comes out of the ground." With his newfound financial security, Samuel bought a small house in Yankton, close enough to his claim to keep an eye on operations, but comfortable enough for him to enjoy his later years. It was a tidy white house with a porch and a garden, and Sarah spent a week helping him settle in. During that week, Preston worked at the McElroy ranch but rode into town every evening to see Sarah. They walked together through Yankton streets, sat together at church on Sunday, and became a familiar sight to the townspeople. Mrs. McElroy, who had taken a personal interest in their romance, made sure to spread the word about how Preston had saved Sarah's life. And the story grew with each telling, until half the town believed he had carried her 50 miles instead of 5. "Does it bother you?" Sarah asked him one evening as they sat on her father's new porch, watching the sunset. "The way people talk about what you did." "They can talk all they want," Preston said. "The only person whose opinion matters to me is yours." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "My opinion is that you are the best man I have ever known, and I am the luckiest woman alive." He kissed her then, properly, the way he had wanted to since the moment she had opened her eyes in the lined shack and looked at him with trust. She kissed him back with a passion that made his heart race, her arms going around his neck, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Preston said, "Marry me, Sarah. I know we have not been courting long, but I do not want to spend another day without knowing you are going to be my wife." "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, Preston, I will marry you. I would marry you today if we could." "Give me 2 weeks," he said. 2 weeks to build us a house, something small but solid. I have been saving my pay for 3 years. It is enough to buy some land and lumber. Your father said I could build on the edge of his property if I wanted, close enough that we can help each other but far enough for privacy. 2 weeks, she agreed. "But Preston, I do not need anything fancy, just 4 walls and you, that is all I need." He built her more than 4 walls. Working from dawn until dark with help from the other McElroy ranch hands on their days off, Preston constructed a small cabin with 2 rooms, a stone fireplace, real glass windows, and a front porch where they could sit together and watch the sunset. It was not much by the standards of her life back east, but Sarah declared it the most beautiful house she had ever seen. They were married in late March of 1878 in the small church in Yankton, with Samuel walking Sarah down the aisle and Mrs. McElroy serving as matron of honor. Preston wore his best clothes, which were still just work clothes, but Sarah said he looked more handsome than any man in a fancy suit. She wore a simple white dress that Mrs. McElroy had helped her sew, and when Preston saw her walking toward him, he had to blink back tears. "Dearly beloved," the preacher began, and Preston barely heard the words. He was too focused on Sarah's face, on the way she was looking at him like he was everything she had ever wanted. When it came time for the vows, his voice was steady. "I, Preston Porter, take you, Sarah Owens, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, protect you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. From this day forward, you will never face a storm alone, because I will always be there to carry you through." Sarah was crying openly now. "I, Sarah Owens, take you, Preston Porter, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, honor you, stand beside you, and build a life with you. You saved my life in that blizzard, but you did more than that. You gave my life meaning and purpose and joy. I will be yours until my last breath and beyond." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Preston kissed her with all the love in his heart, and the small church erupted in applause. The years that followed were the happiest either of them had known. Preston continued to work for the McElroy Ranch, but on his own terms now. He was given responsibility for the Northern Range, the same area where he had found Sarah, and he ran it with skill and dedication. Sarah helped him, learning to ride like she had been born to it, managing their small household, and helping her father with the business side of his mining claim. Their first child, a son they named Paul, was born in the winter of 1879, almost exactly a year after Preston had carried Sarah through the blizzard. He was a healthy, loud baby with his father's dark hair and his mother's gray eyes, and Preston wept when he held him for the first time. "We made this," he said in wonder, looking at Sarah where she lay exhausted but radiant in their bed. "We made a whole person." "We did," she agreed, smiling, "and he is perfect." A daughter followed 2 years later, named Catherine after Sarah's mother. She had Sarah's brown hair and Preston's stubborn independence, and she had both of them wrapped around her tiny finger from the moment she was born. Samuel was a devoted grandfather, teaching Paul to pan for gold and telling Catherine stories about her grandmother. He lived to see his grandson turn 15 and his granddaughter turn 13, before dying peacefully in his sleep in 1894. Content in the knowledge that his daughter was happy and his legacy secure. The claim that Sarah had nearly died delivering documents for eventually produced over $200,000 in gold. Sarah's share, inherited from her father, ensured their family's financial security for generations. But neither Preston nor Sarah ever forgot where they had started, with nothing but each other and the memory of 5 miles through a blizzard. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1903, their children grown and starting families of their own, Sarah and Preston rode out to the spot where he had found her all those years ago. It was summer now, the landscape green and lush instead of buried under snow. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had not found me that day?" Sarah asked as they stood together, his arm around her waist. "No," Preston said firmly, "because you were meant to be found. We were meant to be together. I have never doubted that for a single moment." "Neither have I," she said, turning in his arms to face him. At 47, she was still the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. "You saved my life that day, Preston, but I think I saved yours too in a way. We saved each other." "We did," he agreed, and kissed her the way he had been kissing her for 25 years, with love and tenderness and passion that time had not dimmed. They lived on in their small cabin, which they had expanded over the years to accommodate their growing family, until Preston died in the spring of 1922 at the age of 70. Sarah held his hand as he passed, telling him she loved him, thanking him for the life they had built together. She followed him 3 years later, dying peacefully in her sleep at the age of 69. Their children found her with a smile on her face, and in her hand was clutched an old piece of paper. When they unfolded it carefully, they found it was one of the claim documents, still faintly water-stained from the blizzard of 1878. On the back, in Preston's careful handwriting, were the words, "This paper nearly cost me the woman I love, but it brought her to me instead. Some things are worth 5 miles through a storm. She is worth everything." They were buried side by side in the Yankton Cemetery, their graves marked by a simple stone that read, "Preston and Sarah Porter, bound by love, strengthened by trials, together forever." But the real monument to their love was not in the cemetery. It was in the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren they left behind, all of them carrying the legacy of a cowboy who carried a woman 5 miles through a blizzard and found his reason for living, and a woman who collapsed in the snow and rose again to find her home in the arms of a man who would never let her fall again.